How's it going, y'all? This is Dr. Tyler Khaleesi, physical therapist and strength coach, and today we're going to go over a flexibility flow or dynamic stretching routine that you can do before deadlifts. Now, this is not hitting on any specific issues or restrictions, but if you do have something that's limited or you're finding you have an ache or a pain somewhere, definitely shoot me an email or drop a comment below and we can talk about your situation specifically. Now, if you're just looking to get kind of loose and limber before you hit some deadlifts or want to go through a nice flexibility flow on an off day, this is a great routine to get after. So one of my favorite movements for both deadlifts and squats is going to be a Spiderman Rock Back. So we're going to get in this half kneeling position. We're going to bring our hands down to the ground, and then we're going to rock our hips back until we feel a good stretch in the hamstrings, and then rock the hips forward, and you might get a little stretch at the hip flexor. So we're just going to rock back and forth here. About a minute on each side, maybe even just 30 seconds on each side. Trying to get a little deeper. We want to just feel the stretch in our quad and hip flexor, and then back here in our hamstring or inner thigh. Now that we're in this Spiderman or half kneeling position, we're going to do a little bit of thoracic or trunk rotation. So I'm going to stay right here with my hands down on the ground, and I'm going to rotate my torso in one hand up to the sky and back down, trying to reach that elbow towards the ground. You're going to feel a stretch again, maybe in the hip flexors, but you're also going to feel it in that inner thigh, a little bit of hamstring, but a lot of stretch in that rotation or through that torso or spine. Now, the deadlift inevitably involves a little bit of spinal flexion or extension, so we want to make sure that the musculature and soft tissue around the spine, as well as the spine and the discs themselves, are nice and loose and limber and prepared for some of that movement. So a really simple way is to just get after a little bit of a cat camel. So I'm going to get onto all fours, and then I'm going to bring my spine through a lot of flexion and a lot of extension and increase that range of motion over the course of 30 to 60 seconds. And then at the last movement, we're going to work on some hip extension, so stretching the hip flexors, and a little bit of side bending to get some of that lower back musculature stretched out when we're standing up at the top of a deadlift or a good morning or other sorts of hip hinges. We need to have adequate hip extension mobility so that we can really access our glutes and our posterior chain. So we're going to get into a half kneeling position. Doesn't matter which side you start with. I want to get some engagement at my glutes and my core so that I can stack my ribs over my pelvis, and then I'm going to just lightly lean forward until I feel a little stretch at the hip flexor, and then I'm going to oscillate here back and forth, working deeper and deeper into the stretch. Now this is just a hip flexor stretch, and if you want to add a little bit of lower back stretch, you can add in a side bend. So as I come out of that stretch, I'm going to side bend, and then when I work back into that stretch, I'm going to come back straight. So it's kind of like alternating, stretching the lower back and then stretching the hip flexors, stretching the lower back, stretching the hip flexors. It's important not to lean back and get an arch in your lower back, because now we're not stretching the quad and hip flexors. We want to stay engaged at our core, keep the glute a little bit engaged so that we're really focusing on hip flexor here. And then we could use a little bit of hip internal rotation when we're hip hinging. So this movement here, we want the femur, the leg bone, to be able to rotate inward on that pelvis when we go into a lot of hip flexion, which you may need if you're going into a deep hip hinge. I like to use a little bit of kickstand RDL with some rotation. So I'm just going to hinge my hips back and reach across that foot. So I'm just going to hinge my hips back and reach across that foot, creating a good stretch in the hamstrings, a little bit in the glute, and some relative internal rotation at that hip. Once again, about 30 to 60 seconds here. Well, there you have it, guys. A really simple flexibility flow that you can get after before your deadlift day or hip hinge day or any leg day for that matter. You can also use this on an off day just to find some more mobility and flexibility in your lower body. If you have questions about your own flexibility or mobility limitations, like I said, definitely drop a comment below, or shoot me an email. I'll put that in the link below, and we can talk more about your situation specifically. Have a good day, y'all.